everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 24 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And we are in the midst of a labyrinth trying to get to the bottom floor of the king's tomb. Seems like a simple task. You just gotta get to the bottom floor and you pass the second part of the test. But Sense has not made it easy. There's something is generating replicas of our cast and crew. We don't exactly know what yet, if it's Sense herself or if it's another mage, what it could possibly be. We don't know going into this episode, so it's going to be interesting to see exactly what it is. Is it something that they are going to is it someone or something they're going to have to defeat? We don't know. Or is it just a spell? We don't know. So we're going to have to find out going into this episode here. But I've got a couple comments before we start. Doombringer65 and Andrew Sanusi 8462 were talking about that I'd misread in the episode that it was not Air's father that's the first class mage, it's her grandfather. Gotcha. Now, one of the commenters said, keep your eyes peeled, and I was like, is this spoiling that they're going to show up this season? Because if it is, I'm like, dude, why you spoiling? Why you giving me these expectations? Or is it them just being rude and telling me to pay more attention? I don't know. Either way, don't say such phrases to a reactor that you want to read your comment, because that can be taken as a spoiler. So if they show up, I'm going to be like, well, knew that was coming. So please be mindful as you comment. Charles Baldwin says that, I loved this from Charles Baldwin, by the way, said that Himmel is so badass that the demons, even when he was old, would leave him alone. And on the surface, in the context of the story, yeah, the fact that the demons never went after Himmel, they were so afraid of him, is a pretty remarkable thing. But also by anime logic, you don't mess with old men. Especially in shonen anime, old men are OP as hell. You don't mess with them. So I thought that was really funny. Darwin Award winner talked about the idea of dialogue, and what they really liked about episodes like 21. Episode 21 is the idea that there's no dialogue wasted. It's the idea that it all has a purpose. So, for example, back in Verbal versus Ubel, Verbal is keeping on talking to Ubel because he doesn't want to kill her, so he's trying to find a way out or to stall the moment and wait till the inevitable. And then Ubel is talking to him because she's trying to get to understand him so she can copy his magic. And I was like, oh, that's such a cool thing. And they mentioned some other examples too, but I thought that was really, really well worth mentioning. And then Christopher Peterson talked about a couple things. One thing that stood out that I hadn't really thought about is the concept that Sari has been around in this tomb of books and magic for 1,000 years, but the current Continental Magic Association is only about 50 years old. So what does that mean? There's a couple different explanations. One, either they've been, hoarding away spells and randomly giving out to worthy people that they deem worthy for 1,000 years, and only in the last 50 years have the humans gotten together to make an association. That's one possibility. Or it could be that over time there's been all these, because Frieren did make the comment, there's been lots and lots of magical associations. So it could be over time that Sari has just been kind of like sitting there as the CEO overseeing it, but every time it changes hands, Sari just goes along with it. So it was like this association, and then it was like a monopoly where this association bought them out and merged with them, and Sari's just like, as long as you keep me as the CEO, I don't care what you do. That's what it seems like to me. It seems like there's been all these different magical associations over time, and Sari, who's kind of like Frieren, and they're like, they understand times change and humans change, and humans will eventually die out and give it on. That seems to be the case because humans, only live for so long. So it could be that this group of mages, they died out, this new group of mages took over, and they were like, well, let's tweak the association and call it this now. And then over time, it's just changed hands and changed what it was from time to time. Seems legit to me. But they also talked about the idea of mages building relations with one another, because they were like, these mages, they take this exam every 3 years. Would they want to build like rapport or relations or networking? And I think some of them have, like Dinkin and Laufin and Verbal and Schnar and Scharf and them have built relations. But we kind of get the idea that some mages are inherently arrogant, like the one guy that goes in by himself in the labyrinth in the last episode. Some mages are just out for themselves, like Ubel. Some mages, I mean, it's kind of like human nature. It'd be great if we all just got along and communicated and negotiated and didn't fight. It seems so simple. But yet, when we actually get down to it, it's for some individuals it's really hard and it doesn't work out. So I feel like it's just trying to be a little bit realistic in that sense, maybe. But I want to give a special shout out before we begin to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon, because you all support me week to week. And not only do you support me, but alongside the other patrons and YouTube subscribers, which I'm super grateful for, you all help me to keep doing what I'm doing. So everybody in the philanthropy tier gets a shout out at least once a week in some of my videos. So I want to give a shout out to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Bryant Reed, to Dana, to Destiny Marie, to Danger Zone, to Daverin, Danny Donmai, as well as Ichu, Eric, Ghostly Turnip, Fisho, Kiri, Elfreya, Lyndon, Matthew Palfinier, Murphy, Nameless Monster, Nicholas, as well as Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, and Translucent Men. Thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, let's dive into this episode. I'm super excited to see what we get, to see what we find out. When we last left off, Dinkin and them were fighting a replica of Frieren. It's like Dinkin can't catch a break. He's like, are you freaking for real? So let's see how that ends up working out for him. So we're going to start episode 24 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and check my subtitles. We're on, and let's go. Well, all right. Okay, full disclosure and full transparency. When I started this episode, I have it pulled up on a streaming service. You can probably guess which one. But when I pulled it up on the streaming service, I hadn't noticed it during the intro. But then when I went to start the episode during the OP, I happened to look down. And the first line in the description for this episode that, mind you, has not told us anything about what's causing the replicas, has not revealed any information. The first line is, due to the Spiegel, a legendary monster that can create perfect replicas of others. And I went, oh! Streaming service. For the sake of the reactors, for the sake of casual viewers that have some air of wanting to find out the mystery as we go, why would you start your description revealing what it is? I was like, what? I was like, ah. So when it's not a surprise to me whenever Jeannot started talking about the Spiegel, but I'm glad that they did it right off the bat, because if that had been like something they weren't going to tell us until the end of the episode, I would have been like, well, what a letdown. But so all my theories are like, out the window we go. So interesting. Let's talk about this episode in detail. So we start right there with Jeannot. Spiegel, the water mirror fiend, lord of the dungeon. I find it interesting that they, at the king's tomb, they basically put this water mirror fiend, this demon, at the bottom of it, which is fascinating to me. Like, it's supposed to be this tomb. I guess it's to help keep people from raiding it, or keep people from pilfering it and robbing it, I guess. Keep your grave robbers out, put a giant fiend at the end that could kill them. I guess that's a pretty effective means of protecting the tomb. It's interesting. From a mythical era that appears in Ewig the Sage's heroic tales. Fascinating. So Ewig is getting mentioned again. We have Ewig the Sage. We're going to put them way over here. This idea of Ewig the Sage, who I'm going to take a random guess has probably met Sari before. Probably. And that's where the Spiegel comes from. That's in the dungeon. Interesting. Now, one of the big questions is, can it only make one replica per dungeon trip? So we know some of the replicas have been destroyed so far. Does the Spiegel have the ability to recreate them infinitely? Or is it just like a one-time deal? It sees you once when you come in the dungeon. Once you come into the dungeon, or once you pass a certain point, it copies you once. But if you go back out again, it's going to copy you again. I don't know. We don't really get any answer to that. I'm really curious about the first mage that is alongside, because yeah, that little gemstone is what activated that seems to be the monster itself, is the gemstone, right? And that's what copied the mage to make replicas of its target. There are similar monsters such as the Einsam in the real world right now, which we've met in previous episodes, but the Spiegel's perfect replicas have a physical substance. They copy targets, mana, and skills. But they don't have a mind. So we've learned that in this episode. They don't have a brain. They're not strategic. They're just literally copying abilities, mana, and skills. They're not strategic. They're just powerful. That's all there is to it. It's just brute strength, which honestly is pretty terrifying, because a lot of times, even though our own minds and intellect can allow us to do incredible things and beat opponents that are not, although our minds are able to let us beat opponents stronger than us, a lot of times too, our minds can be a weakness because we second guess ourselves. We're worried about others. We're thinking about other things other than the battle itself. We're distracted. Our minds can sometimes be our own undoing. So the idea that this monster doesn't have that, in some regards, makes it a threat. Like with Sense's replica, Sense's whole mind and their persona and their commitment to being a pacifist keeps it from killing everyone in the dungeon. Whereas this replica doesn't have those same things, so thus they're a problem. So I'm like, I hope that we find a way out of the dungeon where we don't combat Sense's replica. That'd be real great. If we could just avoid that replica, that'd be real great. We'll just let them just roam around endlessly. Let's just do that. But yeah. And so then we have this guy, why did Sense choose this dungeon for her test? And I'm like, well, obviously every person's evenly matched in order, because that's kind of the thing. Sense set this whole test up knowing that these mages just got out of a test where their trust with one another was challenged. Jeannot made them all question each other. And now Sense is like, okay, you guys were all questioning each other, having trust issues. Now let me put you in a situation where you, honestly, the only way to really get out of it is to work together. How's that going to work for you? And then here we go. And it only took that one mage at the beginning who dissented from everybody and set the tone. It just took that one little brick to kind of crumble the tower, so to speak, and make it to where they all question each other. Which now, luckily, cooler minds are somewhat prevailing, where Dinkin and the others are all gathered there in their little powwow down there trying to figure out what to do. But you still have other mages running around that are possibly in danger. So, yeah. Cooler heads and self-analysis and teamwork, which is interesting because Jeannot kind of, the way that Jeannot talks about Sense, he does seem to kind of put her down. He's like, oh, it's the kind of test a pacifist like her would put together. The way he says that, I know even though it may not be worded and maybe his tone doesn't indicate it, it almost seems like Jeannot looks down on her that she would choose something like that. It's not a test that he would pick. He would not be the pacifist to choose something so like harmless, because they get a way to get out of the dungeon, but yet cruel. To him, it's almost like an insult. Like, how dare you? I'm curious about the third guy, the one that has the giant arm. I'm assuming that he might be the proctor of the third exam. Maybe. We haven't gotten confirmation on that. But I like Dinkin's like, shit, this is not good. Dinkin's like, she nearly killed me last time, and she could have killed me if she wasn't, you know, if she was trying. He's like, so this is not good. We need to get out of here until we can figure out what to do. I do like the little world building aspect where they're on the pillars and Richter's like, hey, Dinkin! Like the idea he has to yell across the room. In so many anime that I've watched, especially shonen battle anime, it's like they're a mile away and they're just like talking and they're like, did you hear what he said? And I'm like, in real life, you could not hear what they were saying. But here I like the concept of Richter being like, hey, I'm yelling at you. Ah. I also think that's another sign that the Frieren replica didn't have a mind, because if she, it's like the Ubel replica and the Frieren one, they could literally, if they were able to strategize and comprehend, they would be able to like use that moment to attack. But they're stripped down to just like the base level, right? And Dinkin's like, well, we need to figure out what to do. This is a problem. I want to say, I freaking love Ubel and Land. They're one of my biggest ships in this whole series. I mean, Stark and Fern, they're already married. They just don't want to acknowledge it. But they're already married. We're good. Frieren and Himmel, they're Jack and Rose from Titanic. They're already set in stone. What can we do about them? Kraft and his human companion, they're my side ship, but we know nothing about them, so I can't really do that. Cyan and his guts-like friend, childhood friend, same thing. We know a little bit about them, but we haven't seen them in a while, so that's that. Land and Ubel are like my jam. They are just like, they're enemies to enemies. They're so against each other, and their whole relationship is based on the fact that Ubel wants to learn his magic before she kills him, but along the way, is she growing to like him? Who knows? And Land is like the tsundere that doesn't want to admit that he has any feelings towards her or anyone. I'm like, their dynamic, it's just like angsty and just, mwah. It's just, it's so good. It's so good. The tension, the layers, the depth. I love Land and Ubel. I ship them so hard. I want it to, it's not going to work out for them. And that's the thing too. They're kind of like a star-crossed lovers thing. It's not going to work out for them, I'm sure, but you're just along for the ride, enjoying it for what it is. And however it ends up, you're like, we'll just go with it. So before we go any further, let's establish who's still in the game. So we know we have Denkin's group. Let's just get our group together here that is still doing good. We have Richter, we have Denkin, we have Laufen, we have Methode. She's fun. I like her a lot. We've got them, and now that has joined is Fern and Frieren. And we'll just put Sense off here to the side. Sense is just here. Ignore her. Pretend like she's not there. She doesn't join in the circle. She's off to the side, like just watching and observing. Yep. So they're all together here. And then we have fighting the one group of replicas. We have Verbal, we have Sharf, and we have Air. They're all off against their own set of replicas, right? And here, these guys are all against the replica of Frieren. I think it says something where they all have to face one replica. Meanwhile, we also have Dunst, right? And then poor Edel. Edel's out. Damn. And then One Punch Man. And they were against Sense, so fair enough. I think at that point I've been like, ugh, that Golem's looking really good right now. And then we have Ubel and Land. We did just face off against Ubel's replica. And we defeated them, so they're good. We don't know much about Lavine and Kine yet. And then the one man, Bathman. He's over here. So I wonder if Lavine and Kine are either going to come in contact with these two guys, if they're going to come in contact with Ubel and Land, or if they're going to come in contact with him. I don't know. It would kind of be funny to me if the one guy that decided to go first into the labyrinth and been like, I can do this myself, if he ends up being the last one out and he can't pass. We'll go back to that shot of him in the dungeon. We'll see about that. But yeah, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 17 was her that's out now. And then the one girl from the last group, Stargirl, she got out too. So far, you know, from narrowing down from 57 to 18, so far we're doing pretty well. We've only got, so far 16 are still in the game, which seems interesting. As far as who ends up getting out of this, I don't know. I don't know who will. The thing that's so the thing that adds stakes to this whole thing is poor Stargirl, she just wandered into a random room and it was a trap. So at any given moment, even if they defeat Frieren and her replica, at any given moment, there could be a trapdoor spring, or at the bottom floor, there could be something that like comes out and whoever's walking first gets like tries to get guillotined or something. Who knows? There could be some kind of trap right before the bottom, even if they do beat the replica of Frieren, that prevents at least somebody from getting to the bottom at the end. I don't know. It would also be curious because Sense said, she's like, I don't care how many of you get to the bottom. Just make it to the bottom. That's all you have to do. It would be interesting to see if a lot of them do pass this round, and if Jeannot kind of gives Sense a hard time, being like, well, why did we have 16 pass the mage exam, the second one? We don't want any to pass. You've never let anybody pass before. How'd you let this many pass this time around? And Sense is like, it's Frieren. I don't know, because Frieren seems to be like a key to all of this. Obviously, she's our protagonist, but so yeah. So I feel like Land's copies are insanely OP because they're very hard to detect if they are real or not. Like, he's sitting there bleeding out and you're like, I really thought it was him. I thought it was genuinely Land. And I was like, ooh. And the only part that made me go, I don't think this is Land, is when she gave him the golem. When she gave them hers, and he was like, and she's like, you could use this to get out of here. You're about to die. Leave. And the fact that he didn't, because I feel like Land's the type of character that if he really was dying, if he really was in jeopardy, he would use any means to survive, because that's what he's been using the clones for. He uses the clones to separate himself from the actual pain. So I feel like if he was actually hurt, he would use the golem to get out of there because he wants to live to see another day. He values his life, right? Ubel seems like she's kind of a little bit more laissez-faire about it, where she's like, if I die, I die, but I'm going to go out swinging. I don't have good luck, but what can we do? But it almost also seems like she tells herself that she doesn't have good luck, kind of like to make herself have good luck. She's doing reverse psychology on herself, which the concept of Ubel being someone that wants to psychologically evaluate somebody to steal their magic, I like the layer of her kind of psyching herself out, almost as if she's playing like an Uno reverse card to make it work out in her favor. Ubel is so cool. Like, I know why she was popular from the get-go, because she has like the goth black, the green hair, the punk look, like the I don't give a F. But the more you get to know her character, the more I really like the layers of her. I really like how she's interested in Land, even if it's for herself. Even if she's just trying to get to know his magic so she can copy it and take it for her own. In the same respect, I feel like she's also kind of like trying to, it's interesting, she evaluates her opponents almost as a way of kind of like evaluating herself. And I like that. I think it's cool. And her questioning him, I like the idea that Land can kind of control his copies from a distance and use them to also evaluate her. Again, it's like such great ship dynamics. The fact that he's looking at her from a distance, but he's getting to know her, she's getting to know him. They're on these cute little dates, but it's really to steal each other's magic, you know? It's great. And he's probably getting close to her to figure out if he has to fight her, what is he going to do to combat her? I love it. I'm just glad he didn't die, because I really like Land and I really like Ubel, and I didn't want either of them to get out at this point. So, I don't know. There is a part of me that feels like Land at some point might not pass this exam and become a first-class mage. I won't be surprised if Ubel does, though, which is interesting. I want to get this shot of Ubel holding the golem. I kept thinking the entire time that she was going to smash it. The whole time I thought that replica of Ubel was going to smash the golem. And I'd be like, ugh. And I thought for a second that it was going to be a problem, because I thought if she smashes his golem, that it will take him out of the labyrinth. And I'm like, that's like almost cheating, right? But then when Ubel gave him her golem and was like, if you smash this, you can go out. So the golems are not tied to the individual people. It doesn't matter if someone steals your golem and smashes it, it's not going to send you back. Whoever smashes the jar gets sent back. So in this case, if Ubel, the replica, had smashed the jar, the replica would be sent out of the labyrinth, I guess, and would evaporate or change because it would be out of Spiegel's range of command, I'm assuming. So really, her taking the golem from Land was just preventing Land from being able to escape, so he could actually die down there. And I like the idea that the golem ends up being the copy of the golem ends up being a fake. So maybe that was part of it too. Maybe the replica realized that the golem was a fake, and she was just sitting there looking at it like, this isn't the real golem. What is this? I don't understand. The replica cannot comprehend what's beyond its understanding, because it's not a replica of Land. So that, I guess that should have been foreshadowing that it wasn't the actual golem and it wasn't the actual Land. Show, why are you being so smart? I like that. I like it a lot. And she's like, you're not going to last long like this, so you're going to get out. I feel like, Ubel just trying to understand him more. And then when he can't use her golem, she's like, yeah, it's fine. I loved the combat between Ubel and her replica. I loved it. Like, it was so good. And her being like, I'm not lucky. I have to rely on myself. I've never been a lucky person, so I have to like copy. And that makes sense with her character too. She's not a lucky person, so she has to copy other people's magic. Oh, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Love her. And then the moment that she gets just out of range to attack, and I like, normally when anime does that like fishbowl eye moment, you're like, what are you doing? Are you just being stylistic? Or are you just being weird for weird's sake? Here, it makes sense because it's showing it. The replica saw her entire being in full range and was able to like get her down. And then, man, if these two characters weren't enemies to enemies, the moment he shows up would be like a heroic knight in shining armor moment where he shows up to save her. Would have been that. But that's the best part about their ship, is that all these elements that would normally be romantic or like connecting their characters together, they're trying to actively hurt each other. I love it. I love it. And she's like, wow, you were a fake. And he's like, you knew that it was a clone of me that was dying, so why did you rush to your death? And she's like, because I knew you'd save me. Because you didn't want it on you. And I like that she's like, I'm trying to understand you more and realizing you are someone that does not want to feel guilty for others. You want to only be responsible for yourself. And she's like, I respect that. I'm learning more about you so I can steal your cloning ability. I love it. It's so freaking good. I love, and she keeps calling him Four Eyes instead of Land, which is neat. I feel like they're setting up though, because he's like, why are you calling me Four Eyes? Why don't you just call me Land? And she's like, no, I'm not. No, I don't want to do that. I feel like the moment that she copies his magic and is able to empathize with him and feels him out is the moment that she'll call him Land. And that's going to be a moment. And I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. We'll see if it happens or not. So yeah, I do admit that I'm glad Fern kind of calls it out. She's like, Frieren, you know, we really haven't had any like mix-ups or crazy stuff happen and everything's gone pretty smooth. And I'm like, quit jinxing it, Fern. But I feel like it seems so poetic and so strategic that Spiegel put the most powerful copy, the most powerful replica as the final boss at the bottom of the dungeon. Although Sense's replica is pretty damn strong, so they could have put Sense down there at the bottom, but I don't know. I feel it's more strategic because with Sense's replica, it almost feels like Sense's replica was there perfectly placed to tackle the one person that could have helped them with, possibly with the Frieren replica. But we know now that wasn't going to work. It doesn't have a mind, so that wasn't going to work at all. With Frieren's replica, I feel like it being at the bottom is very strategic on Sense and the Spiegel's part, because Frieren right now is the one mage that Jeannot and Sense and the others seem most curious about. They're like, oh, hey, she's the one that defeated the Demon King. She's the one that broke through Ceri's barrier that Jeannot didn't think was possible. She's the one that maybe poses the most potential to becoming a first-class mage, but she's weird. She doesn't want any of the spells. So I feel like Frieren is the one that Sense wants to know the most about. So it would make sense, put the Frieren replica at the bottom, because one, if a group gets down there that doesn't contain Frieren in it, and they manage to defeat her, then that could show a sign of how Frieren could be fought in the real world. But two, if Frieren's group goes down there, and Frieren strategizes how to beat herself, you're revealing what Frieren's weaknesses are, what a possible way to defeat her is, etc., etc. So it is very beneficial for the replica at the base to not be Sense's, but to be Frieren's, because that's the person they want to find the most information about now at this moment. I also like how excited Frieren gets when she's like, no. There's still another treasure here. We gotta go see it. There could be a grimoire. We gotta go, right? And I love the way that they animate her looking so excited, and her just like skittering like a cat trying to find the entrance, and Sense and Fern are just like, what are we doing? It's so cute. I remember playing the old Sega games of Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic the Hedgehog, and there was a sequence, also like Aladdin and things like that, there's a sequence where like the rocks move and things get out of the way. The moving of the statues felt very reminiscent of that, and I had like a wave of nostalgia. So the treasure that they find is this mural, the achievements of the king buried there. And since it's like, oh wow, this mural is like really intact. So we have the king, he has his staff, and there's the people bowing before him, and even the animals are like bowing before him, right? And there's these trees that it looks like there's some like, looks like some text inscribed there. There's like some trees, and the trees have these gems with like three-pronged branches that come out. I'm wondering if the gemstones in the middle of the tree and the fact that it has 3 parts to it have any significance. So far, the rule of 3, I mean, the rule of 3 is in so many things. The number 3 is very symbolic in a lot of cultures, but you have trios throughout anime. We have 3 proctors. We have our group of 3 as they go on. The first test had them split into groups of 3. The number 3 has a lot of significance. I also think it's very telling that you have it looks like the goddess, who has elf ears, is over the king. So it's this idea that the goddess, it's her and her magic that allowed him to use it to prosper and gain all of his achievements. Now, the question is, are we going to say that the goddess is symbolic? Are we going to say that the goddess just symbolizes magic and how he was able to use it? Or is that goddess there in the picture, in the mural, supposed to be Sari? Because some people say that Sari's like the goddess. It's, you know, what do we do with that? I love that Fern is so enamored by the mural, because Fern is someone who's deeply tied to the religious aspect of this world, and the goddess and all that is tied to religion. So of course Fern would be like, oh, this is so good to find this mural. It's a part of history. It has all the significance. She would be very, very excited by it. And Frieren, despite her being kind of agnostic, is like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty glad we found this. I love that transition of her turning back around and then boom, they're getting out. So that was all. Just making like a little sidestep. Just a little sidestep on the quest. She's like, I want to keep finding everything we possibly can. So yeah, and then on the walls, you have the tree, again, with the 3 branches, and then it has the four sets of diamond-shaped things coming off of it as well. And the diamond-shaped things look like the defensive magic catacombs that create the spells. Nice. It's like just adding to the layers of the design. I love Dinkin being like, go see who's in there. Then we got a face. He's like, check it out. How are we gonna beat that? Here's my thing. If they found a mimic, we'd have it. We'd have it all solved. All they gotta do is find a mimic. That is literally Frieren's weakness. You find that, we're good to go. But it doesn't have a mind, so I don't think the mimic would actually work, because that mimic would be relying on Frieren's natural personality and her curiosity to make her want to go get the mimic and get the grimoire. These replicas don't necessarily have your personality. They just have your skills, your hit points, and your techniques. That's all it knows. It doesn't really have a mind to strategize. It's just brute force. So the mimic wouldn't work, but it would be a funny thought if it did. So then Methode. Dinkin talks about how we should be able to try to restrain it or use hypnosis magic. And that's what Richter says too. So Methode, whatever her name is, they're like, you're good at that thing. She's like, well, I wouldn't say exactly I'm good. But I like that she's like, excuse me, I hope you give me consent to give you a hug. And I like that Frieren's like, oh yeah, sure, I'm all for. Our bisexual queen Frieren is like, or I guess she's asexual if we're gonna make that comment, because she's just like, oh, you smell nice. Like she just doesn't, she's not bothered by the intimate moment with Methode. Whereas Frieren is like, no. Fern is like, no, this is my granny, my mentor. You don't get to hug her. You stay away. It was a super cute moment. I liked that. But I like the idea that she gets to know someone through touch, and that lets her know if she can restrain them or not. It makes more sense why she's been like grabbing the chicken, grabbing the other things. Again, the show gives us these little character moments that at the time seem like they're just for comedic effect, or they're just, you know, just funny or something like this. But then you get to see, no, they have a purpose. There's a reason that's happening, and this is how. So Love it. Love it. It's great. And she's like, could you look into my eyes? And then Frieren's like, I'm not somebody you hypnotize. It doesn't exactly work. But I just, I love Fern just being like, no, you don't get to touch her. And Frieren's like, oh, okay, did I do something wrong? And Fern's like, stay away from her. And Dinkin's like, so that's how it is in their family. He's like, we need more info. Meanwhile, Edel and the others, oh my God, Sense's replica with the hair going out everywhere looks like, one, a dang Pokemon. Looks like Milotic mixed with Tangela. 2, it looks like Cousin It from the Addams Family. And 3, is the most terrifying thing of this series so far. And the way Edel explains it, it's like, I would absolutely understand why Sense would ask for that spell now to make her hair a source of magic. Because 1, we've established that you have to have mana, sure, to make magic work. 2, you have to understand basically the basics of it, like defensive versus offensive magic. But 3, it's all about imagination and how you envision your magic being used, right? So if you can't imagine yourself winning, it's not going to work. And I liked this idea that she talked about how defensive magic can use up a lot of mana. And often if you can't, you either have to make your own objects or you have to use that in the space. Now, using that in the space doesn't necessarily require a lot of mana, but it's very difficult because if you're in a dungeon, you don't got a lot to work with. Because if you start taking bits and pieces out of the infrastructure of the dungeon, it's going to collapse on you and you're going to die. So you got to be careful and sparing with what you use. And then if your magic requires you using a certain element like water, for example, like Kine, then you're up a creek without a paddle if you don't got water. Now it looked like where Bathman was, that there was water. So that's what makes me think that these two, Lavine and Kine, are going to run into him next episode maybe, because she would be able to use water to maybe help him out. So plot-wise, narrative-wise, it would make sense if the story was going to have these guys meet up and Lavine and Kine could use their magic there where the water is. That would make sense. But we'll see if that happens next episode or not. But yeah, so you can either use the objects around you and not use as much mana, which explains like Richter's techniques, Lavine, Kine, and all that. Or you can make your own objects, but that uses up a lot of mana to make your own stuff, right? Which makes sense. But if you have an object on you at all time that you can just use randomly and never worry about it going away, because here's the thing, hair regenerates. You lose some hair, it will grow back. As long as you're alive, your hair will usually always grow back, right? Typically. There are exceptions. But it'll grow back. So as long as Sense has hair, she can use her magic to and there's thousands of strands of hair on a human head. So she has all of these potentials to use her magic however she wants to. And plus, the idea of imagination and envisioning, you always have your hair with you. So you can always imagine what you do with it. Like you can create constructs. You can be like, oh, I'm going to use my hair like a drill. I can imagine what that looks like. I can visualize it. That's genius. And also for someone that's a pacifist like Sense, it makes total sense because she's like, I'm never going to be in a situation that I have to worry about having to fight someone. I can use my hair to bind them. I can use my hair to propel myself away from a situation. I can use my hair as a barrier. I can use my hair as a shield. I can use my hair to knock someone out of the way or throw them away. She's like, I don't have to attack if I don't want to. I can use my hair to get away or to do anything that I want. I love Sense. I love everything about her character, Ubel's character, and there's such different characters along with Frieren. I would say Daddy Dinkin's up there for me right now. I would say my top 5 characters as of right now, I love Frieren. Frieren's grown on me so much. She's my first. She's my granny. She's grown on me so much. At the beginning of the series, I didn't really care for her. And then by like episode 5, I was like, ooh. And now I'm like, yes, girl's my favorite. I love Frieren. I would honestly say that Ubel is up there for me. I like her a lot. She's up there. Daddy Dinkin's probably in my top 3. I'd say they are. And then I would say Stark. He's up there in my top 5. And then I would say Sense. Sense is up there. I love Sense's character and how she is so far. She's maybe, I would say her and Fern are vying because they're very similar. But my boy Stark, he's up there in my top as well. But there are so many good characters though. Like you could have a top 10, a top 20, and have lots of room to go with it. But also, I like how this series kind of subverts what we think is going to happen. Because the moment they mention Adele having this power to hypnotize through her voice, which is really cool. I also like how the show gives a caveat. They're like, yeah, she has the power to hypnotize, which seems like an OP ability. However, she has to be able to see you and talk to you. So if you're deaf, that ain't gonna work. If you're don't have a mind like the replica, it's not gonna work. And if she can't see you and speak to where you can hear her, it's not going to work. So I like all the caveats to make it a little bit more of a realistic ability. But her problem is she tests it out, and you think, like originally I'm like, okay, she's going to test it out on the synth statue, get it to kneel, and then they may not be able to beat it, but she's going to know now that it'll work, and they'll go find Frieren. Well, it kind of works. So far, the two guys are running away to hopefully find Frieren and the others. I don't know if that's going to work out for them, but we'll see. But yeah, the idea is that they thought that they would test it out. I did not imagine the synth's replica just slicing through her in that moment. That part was insane. And the fact that she can use her hair like a drill or a blade or a knife. It was giving me very Elder Toguro vibes. The Sense's ability, if you've ever watched Yu Yu Hakusho, Elder Toguro and their abilities, it gives me a lot of vibes with that. The hair gives me that kind of vibe as well. But damn, she uses her golem and gets out of there. Oh, sucks. And I like that we established the two guys that she's with, their abilities are either more long range combat or they're suited to like use the abilities around them. So the dungeon is like the worst place for them. Interesting. And they're like, so Sense never intended for any of them to pass, which is fascinating to me because she's just following all of them around. I feel like Sense is following Frieren because, again, she thinks she's the most likely to pass and she wants to see if she's going to be able to, and to kind of evaluate her. But again, she's not doing anything. She's not helping or hindering. She's just like, we'll see. I do love the idea that Ubel and Land, we see him like jumping around. And so there are these canals, right? There's these canals with water, like Land and Ubel jump over one. So they could be close to where this guy is as well. So they could run into them in the next episode. And then we see Kenny and Lavigne. It looks like they're just navigating through the dungeon and everything. But I don't know if they're close to the canal or not. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what they're about to jump over to. So maybe they're all near one another. Yeah, they're near one another too, it seems. And then we see, yeah, I love the shot of Bathman down at the bottom by himself. I love that shot. It's so full of despair in that moment, but I'm like, is he gonna make it out? Or is he like, I should have stayed with them? That's such a good shot. It's such a good shot! Anyway, them talking about working together. And again, we cut from him by himself to the shot of the 5 united front of them all outside of the tomb, and then we cut to them all gathered around, the 5 of them gathered around with Richter in a group together. It's really good. So they're like, can we do it? And Fern's like, well, Fern's like, I stand the biggest chance of being able to defeat Frieren. And Frieren does not look bothered. Frieren's like, yeah, I think Fern could destroy me if she wanted to. Let's give it a try. Let's go for it. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I'm curious to see their plan of how they're going to face Frieren, how they think they're going to tackle her and get her out of the way. I'm very curious about that. Meanwhile, we have the replicas of Verbal, Sharf, and Air fighting them. And I like the idea of the matchup where Verbal's like, yeah, the matchup between us all, this will work. He's like, we all know how to face one another. We all know our weaknesses. We all know how to win, no matter the opponent or the situation. I like it. I like that Verbal's like, we got this. So it's just a matter of time. I'm still so curious to see how it's going to go. Like, what are they going to end up doing? How's this going to work? Very curious. Very curious indeed. But yeah, I loved this episode. This whole arc so far, even though we are taking our time getting through everything, it still feels the same vibe of Frieren, where it's like going through the dungeon and going through the rooms and finding the random things. It does have that same feeling of we're taking our time and doing it and going through it, but there is a stake of we've got to get this accomplished. And we are on a time crunch, so we got to figure out what to do. So, and we have all these extra characters, so of course we're going to take extra episodes to kind of think about how do we go about this. So, I'm enjoying it. I love it. So, we've got 2 down. We're going to see what's going to happen next. So, I am excited to hear your comments down below. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye!